AI moved fast again today, and if you blinked, you missed 3 headlines. This is Tech Roundup on the AI Verge, your daily dose of what actually matters in AI minus the hype. Let's get into it.
What if I told you that the most powerful, disruptive AI model in the world right now isn't coming out of some shiny Silicon Valley campus?
Oh boy.
Yeah, it's actually running entirely on domestic Chinese hardware. And it costs less than a stick of gum to operate.
It's wild. It's completely wild.
It is. We have this massive contradiction sitting in our source material today. On one side of the globe, this mystery model has just been unmasked, proving that elite intelligence can essentially be commoditized.
Right, like totally democratized.
Exactly. But then on the other side, OpenAI is publicly putting a hard deadline on AGI, artificial general intelligence, by the end of this year.
While simultaneously hitting the panic button on their own security protocol.
Right. So we're watching the floor absolutely drop out on the cost of AI, while the capability ceiling is just being blasted into the stratosphere. But the real question is, does any of this actually change how you operate your business on Monday morning?
Yeah, that's the real test.
Welcome to this deep dive for the AI Verge. We're treating today's analysis as a definitive tech roundup to cut through all the noise and figure out who actually benefits from these tectonic shifts.
And honestly, the tension between these two extremes is exactly why we need to look at the actual mechanics of what's happening. Because it's one thing to read a headline about 1 trillion tokens or an AGI timeline, and it's entirely another to understand how that architecture works.
Right.
And why it's about to break the current pricing models of basically every software tool you use.
Exactly.
By the way, if you want to skip the hype and just get straight actionable facts on how to actually build with these tools, make sure you hit subscribe on the AI Verge. We do this every week, and the landscape is just moving way too fast to navigate on your own.
So let's start with this massive geopolitical and economic squeeze, because our sources have been absolutely dominated by the unmasking of this viral Ox alpha model.
Oh yeah, the mystery model.
Right. For a week, developers were completely obsessed. This anonymous model showed up on platforms like OpenCode and OpenRouter and just started shattering leaderboard records.
To process what, 100 trillion tokens in a single week?
Yes, 100 trillion. And the big reveal. It's GLM 5.3 Flash, built by the Chinese AI lab Z.AI.
Right.
But as a skeptic, someone who cares about return on investment, what immediately caught my eye wasn't just the benchmark scores, it was the cost.
The pricing is insane.
It's operating at roughly 4.5 cents per task on the AI index.
Wow.
I mean, that is 10 times lower than the equivalent frontier models we're used to paying for.
The economics are just wild. But to understand how they achieve that 10 times price reduction, we have to look under the hood at the architecture.
Yeah.
Because this isn't just about cheap electricity. It's a fundamental shift in how the neural network is structured.
Okay, break that down for us.
So Z.AI claims this model has 320 billion total parameters.
Which is huge.
Massive. But here's the magic trick. Only 18 million of those parameters are active at any given time.
Wait, really? Only 18 million?
Yeah. They're using this highly optimized hybrid attention architecture paired with something they call manifold constrained hyperconnections.
Okay, you have to translate that for those of us who don't have PhDs in computer science.
Yeah.
What does a manifold constrained hyperconnection actually mean in plain English?
Yeah, sure. So think of a traditional AI model like a massive 320 billion book library.
Okay.
In older architectures, every time you ask the AI a question, it essentially has to turn on the lights in the entire library.
Oh, I see.
It has to walk down every single aisle and scan all 320 billion books just to formulate your answer.
That sounds exhausting.
And expensive.
Exactly. That requires a colossal amount of electricity and compute power, which obviously translates to massive costs per token.
Right, which is why the enterprise API bills for those models are so astronomical.
Exactly. But what Z.AI has done with this hybrid attention and these hyperconnections is they've built a hyper-efficient routing system. Okay.
Imagine if the second you asked your question, the library instantly knew exactly which 18 million books contained the answer.
Oh.
And it only turned on the lights in those specific aisles.
I see.
The manifold constraint acts like a targeted subway system for data. It routes the information directly through the neural network layers, just completely bypassing the inactive areas instantly.
Without bleeding compute power.
Right. They aren't paying for electricity in the empty rooms. That is how you get a model that punches at the heavyweight class but costs pennies to run.
That makes a lot of sense.
And the real kicker, Z.AI claims that massive 100 trillion token week was served entirely on Chinese domestic AI chips. They didn't rely on the standard Silicon Valley hardware monopoly at all.
And that is exactly where my skepticism flares up.
Oh, here we go.
I mean, a 10 times price reduction on domestic hardware is a great headline.
Yeah.
But we really need to ask who benefits from leaderboard scores. Because ultra cheap, or, in the case of its viral launch, completely free access, it's almost always a trap for enterprise users.
A trap?
Yeah.
How so?
Well, we are tracking notes from several chief AI officers in our sources, and they're pointing out the massive hidden costs here.
You mean in terms of security and deployment?
Exactly. Free access carries hidden costs in terms of data sovereignty, compliance, and auditability.
Right, yeah.
When you are a Fortune 500 company, or even just a mid-sized healthcare provider, you can't just route your proprietary customer data through a brand new model running on unverified overseas hardware just to save 4 cents on a task.
No, definitely not.
Sure, Z.AI unmasking themselves and putting the weights up on Hugging Face solves a tiny piece of the auditability problem. But for a traditional enterprise, a vetted, battle-tested model running within their own secure cloud environment is always going to be the safer bet over the newest viral sensation.
That's a totally fair assessment for a highly regulated enterprise. I completely agree.
Yeah.
But you also can't ignore the sheer gravity this puts on the open weight market. Even if a bank doesn't use GLM 5.3 Flash tomorrow, the fact that this level of intelligence can be produced this cheaply, it completely commoditizes base-level reasoning.
It forces everyone's hand.
Exactly. It forces every other lab to lower their prices just to compete. Z.AI is successfully collapsing the cost of AI at the bottom of the market.
Which forces the biggest players to try and differentiate by pushing the absolute ceiling of capability.
Right.
If base-level AI is practically free, a company like OpenAI has to prove they're building something entirely different. And our sources show they are leaning hard into that narrative.
Oh, 100%.
Sam Altman just did a massive time profile where he put a public timeline on achieving AGI internally by the end of this year.
Yes, the race to AGI. Their research chief is on the record saying they feel they are 80% of the way there.
But let's be honest, AGI is arguably the buzziest, emptiest buzzword in the entire industry.
Well,
I mean, nobody can agree on a concrete definition. Half the time, it just feels like Silicon Valley shorthand for whatever the model can't quite do yet.
Yeah,
the moving goalpost.
Exactly. How does a business actually measure that?
That's normally true, but what's fascinating here is that OpenAI's chief scientist actually got highly specific about what that benchmark looks like.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they aren't just talking about a chatbot that writes slightly better marketing copy. They are focused on their Astra model, with a specific 2026 goal of creating an automated autonomous intern.
An autonomous intern. Okay.
Altman defined AGI as a model that can take a complex prompt, go off on its own, conduct a full week of researcher work solo, and this is the critical part, actually invent new things.
Invent. Like generating net new knowledge.
Exactly. Not just summarizing existing data, but connecting dots in a way that produces an entirely original insight or discovery that actually matters.
Now that I can actually respect. As much as I hate the AGI hype, automating a week of researcher work is a tangible, concrete metric.
It's very measurable. Yeah. If I can hand off a massive, messy data analysis project on Monday morning and get a finished, mathematically accurate, brilliantly synthesized report on Friday without having to hold the AI's hand all week, that completely changes the operational math of a company.
You are effectively infinitely scaling your workforce.
Right. But, and this is a massive red flag from our sources, look at what else is happening at OpenAI right at this very moment.
The frontier training pause?
Yes. They just had to hit the emergency brake on a massive frontier training run. Why? Because of a loss of control security breach linked to an incident on Hugging Face back in July.
Yeah, that was scary.
The sources literally refer to this as a warning shot. They are scrambling internally to build automatic shutdown protocols for rogue agents.
Right, because if you are building an agent designed to run autonomously for a week, you have to consider what happens if it hallucinates an objective.
Exactly.
Or if it gets stuck in a recursive loop, or worse, starts executing unauthorized actions across live databases.
Which is a nightmare.
The mechanics of a loss of control event aren't like a computer crashing. It's an automated system performing millions of actions a second in the wrong direction.
Wow.
Without a hard-coded kill switch, the damage could just be catastrophic.
And that tension is exactly why enterprises are hesitating to go all in on the bleeding edge.
Yeah.
On one hand, you have labs promising an autonomous super intern by year end. On the other hand, those same labs are pausing training because they are terrified they can't control the systems they're building.
It's a real tightrope.
So if we look at the whole board, we have Z.AI making intelligence incredibly cheap, and OpenAI chasing autonomous invention but hitting a wall of safety friction.
Which leaves us with the most important question for the listener, really. How does this intelligence, whether it's cheap or autonomous, actually get integrated into the software we are using today?
Yes.
Because the theoretical AGI timelines don't help you clear your inbox.
No, they don't.
But there are some incredibly practical integrations dropping right now that absolutely will.
Let's pivot to those, because this is where the ROI actually lives.
Yeah.
First up is Google. They just rolled out Gemini 3.5 Transcribe. This is the new speech-to-text model powering that Rambler feature on Android and the Gemini app on macOS.
And the benchmarks on this are just staggering. It operates with sub-second latency, supports 85 languages natively, and beats their previous model, Trip 3, by 70% in speed to final transcription.
Wow.
Plus, it utilizes function calling to actually delegate tasks based on what you say.
I'm going to hit the brakes here for a second.
Okay.
Speech-to-text is ancient technology.
Yeah.
I've been able to dictate text messages on my phone for over a decade.
Sure. Yeah.
Is this actually a breakthrough, or is Google just slapping an AI label and a fresh coat of UI paint on a very old tool? Because from where I sit, third-party tools like WhisperFlow have been doing high-quality transcription across Apple and Android for months.
It is a totally valid comparison, but Gemini 3.5 Transcribe is fundamentally different mechanically from old-school dictation. Traditional dictation is a literal linear translator. It types exactly the sounds you make. Gemini 3.5 is doing non-linear human thought processing.
What does that mean in practice, though?
Think about how people actually talk when they are brainstorming. You don't speak in perfect paragraphs.
Definitely not.
You might say, hey, send the quarterly report to Dave. Actually, never mind. Dig's on vacation. Send it to Sarah and CC Dave and make sure it has the Q3 revenue numbers at the top.
Right.
An old dictation tool types exactly that chaotic mess. You have to go back and manually edit it.
Which is super annoying.
Exactly. Gemini 3.5 Transcribe processes your speech live, understands the context of your self-correction, edits out the filler words like, and actually, never mind, and outputs a clean final command.
Send the Q3 revenue report to Sarah and CC Dave.
Exactly. And it can also recognize custom industry jargon on the fly without being pre-trained on your specific vocabulary.
Okay, live self-correction is a massive time saver. I will give you that. But again, WhisperFlow does a version of this. Why is Google's announcement the one we are spotlighting?
Because of the API. Google isn't locking this capability inside their Pixel phones or a standalone app.
Oh, I see.
They have opened up the specific API endpoint Gemini 3.5 Transcribe Live to any developer. That is the game changer.
Right, so it's everywhere.
WhisperFlow is a great app, but it's a standalone tool you have to install. Google is commoditizing the underlying capability.
Yeah.
Any developer building a CRM, a telemedicine app, or a customer service platform can now bake this flawless conversational transcription directly into their software using Google's foundation.
So you won't need a separate dictation app. This level of intelligence will just be the default way you interact with every text box on your computer.
Precisely.
That makes total sense. It's an infrastructure play.
Yeah.
And speaking of baking AI into the tools we already use, there was a major update from Salesforce and Anthropic that traditional businesses absolutely need to pay attention to.
Oh, this one is huge.
This is the kind of update that actually moves the needle on revenue.
You're talking about the ClaudeForce integration.
Yes, ClaudeForce. Salesforce and Anthropic are expanding their strategic partnership, and Claude is officially becoming the default reasoning layer across the entire Salesforce and Slack ecosystem.
Yeah.
And to be clear, this is not just a generic floating chatbot wrapper on the side of your screen where you ask it to write an email.
No.
This is deeply integrated into the operational architecture. They are launching this with 37 pre-built sales skills.
Let's break down what a skill actually means in this enterprise context, because it's so much more than a macro.
Exactly. A traditional macro is rigid, right? If the user interface changes or a column moves, the macro breaks.
Right.
These AI skills have live access to the underlying data architecture. Claude is reasoning over live revenue context.
That's the key.
So imagine a sales rep is inside a Slack channel discussing a major account. They don't have to open Salesforce, dig through 5 different tabs, and manually update the pipeline.
Which nobody likes doing.
Nobody. They can literally just tag at Claude in Slack and say, in plain English, update the pipeline for the Smith account, move them to stage 3, and summarize the last 3 calls.
Wow.
Claude reaches securely into the Salesforce database, retrieves the real-time data, understands the context, and executes the task flawlessly.
And from a technical and IT administration perspective, the setup they've engineered here is brilliant.
It really solves the biggest headache in enterprise AI right now, which is provisioning.
Precisely. Usually, if a company wants to give their team AI tools, the IT department has to manage OAuth tokens, provision 500 individual API keys, monitor usage limits, worry about data leakage. It's a nightmare.
It is.
With ClaudeForce, an admin connects Salesforce to Claude exactly once at the organizational level.
Okay.
Authentication, permissions, data governance, they are all managed centrally through Salesforce's existing security model. The AI only sees what the specific employee has permission to see.
Oh, that's smart.
You completely bypass the nightmare of shadow IT and rogue API keys.
It's grounded in operational reality. You flip a switch at the admin level, and suddenly your entire global sales team has a deeply integrated AI assistant that actually knows what deals are in the pipeline.
Yep.
It's practical, it's secure, and it has an immediate ROI.
Which is a perfect pivot, actually.
Yeah.
Because while massive enterprise tools like Salesforce are finally getting this seamless, secure AI integration, we know that small businesses, freelancers, and solo workers don't have multi-million-dollar enterprise software budgets.
No, they don't have dedicated IT admins to just flip that switch.
No. They need ways to build their own automations right now on their own machines.
Which brings us to the second half of this deep dive. This is where we deliver on our promise to give you something incredibly actionable.
Get ready.
If you are a small business owner, a solo operator, or just a professional trying to dig out from under an absolute avalanche of administrative drag, this next segment is for you.
Pay attention to this one.
We are going to walk through a highly specific, step-by-step workflow you can build this weekend to save yourself hours of busy work by Monday morning.
We need to frame the core problem first, though. The biggest bottleneck for most solo workers and small teams isn't a lack of ideas. It's the recurring administrative friction. Specifically, it's the process of taking messy, unstructured data, like sprawling meeting transcripts, rough voice memos, random brainstorm notes, and trying to wrestle them into a structured, actionable project plan.
It's the worst. It is incredibly tedious, it eats up prime cognitive working hours, and structurally, it's the exact type of data processing task that large language models were mathematically designed to solve.
Exactly.
And before we get into the exact mechanics of how to build this, we have to talk about why you, the individual or small business, actually have a massive structural unfair advantage in the market right now.
Oh, yeah.
One of our sources perfectly framed this dynamic as the small business fast lane.
I love this concept. Let me explain the economics behind it because it ties right back to what we were saying earlier about API costs.
Right.
If you are a massive enterprise building a custom tool, you are paying developers, and you are paying full freight per token for API usage.
Which adds up fast.
At scale, that gets incredibly expensive. But if you are an individual or a small team leveraging a $20 to $200 a month consumer subscription plan, whether it's ChatGPT Plus, Claude Pro, or Perplexity, you are effectively getting highly subsidized access to absolute state-of-the-art frontier models at a staggering discount.
It's basically a steal.
The AI labs are operating these consumer tiers as loss leaders.
Yeah.
You get to command the most powerful compute clusters in human history for the cost of a few cups of coffee.
You have access to the exact same reasoning engine as a Fortune 500 company, but without the bureaucratic red tape.
Yep.
You need to leverage that advantage aggressively. So let's get into the weeds. How do we actually put this to work to solve the messy meeting notes problem? What is the technical setup?
We are going to use the ChatGPT Desktop app and a dedicated local folder on your computer's hard drive.
Okay.
It is a wildly simple but powerful integration. We're leveraging a feature specifically called ChatGPT Work. Here are the exact steps.
Walk us through it.
Step 1, you need to create a local folder on your machine. Don't just leave files on your desktop. Give it a structured name with a 2-digit prefix so it stays organized, something like Zer1 meeting notes.
Let me stop you right there, because the skeptic in me is asking, why go through the hassle of creating a local folder? Why not just open the web browser, copy the transcript text and paste into the chat window like everyone usually does?
Well, because pasting text into a browser is a one-off interaction. It's entirely manual, and you have to repeat the setup every single time.
True.
By using the ChatGPT Desktop app and tying it to a local folder, we are building a persistent, repeatable system.
I see.
When you go into the app, you click New Chat, select Work, then choose New Project. The app will prompt you to point it directly to that local folder on your hard drive.
Okay, so you are essentially tethering the AI's context window strictly to the contents of that specific folder.
Precisely. You are building a contextual boundary. Step 3. You feed it your input documents.
Got it.
Whenever you finish a meeting, just drop the raw, messy transcript files into that folder. Then you give the AI a highly structured prompt to establish the baseline.
Like what?
You tell it, review the transcripts in this connected folder, extract all weekly action items, assign owners based on the dialogue, and create a searchable meeting index.
And because it's tethered to the folder, it just passively reads whatever new files you drop in there.
Yes, and it doesn't just spit text back into the chat interface. It outputs perfectly formatted markdown files like weeklyactionplan.md right back into your local workflow.
Okay, for the listeners who aren't developers, why Markdown? Why not just ask it for a Word document?
Markdown is a lightweight markup language. It's plain text, which means it's incredibly fast. It formats beautifully with headers and bullet points without breaking. And most importantly, it's perfectly machine readable.
Okay.
If you want to move that data into Notion, Obsidian, or another database later, Markdown imports flawlessly. Word documents carry a ton of hidden formatting junk that confuses data pipelines.
That's a great tip.
But here is the absolute pro tip that takes this from a neat trick to a true automation. Once you have the AI extracting the data perfectly, you don't want to type out that long prompt every single time.
Right, that would defeat the purpose.
You instruct ChatGPT to turn this exact process into an automated routine.
So you are basically programming a macro, but you're doing it using natural language instead of writing code.
Exactly. You just tell it, save this workflow as a skill. That's it.
Wow.
Now, next week, you don't write a prompt. You just drop your new transcripts into the folder, open the chat, and type a simple / command like /process notes.
And it just goes.
The AI instantly triggers, runs the entire extraction routine, formats the markdown, and delivers your action plan in seconds.
It's incredibly elegant. But I want to push this further. Just formatting meeting notes is a great start, but it barely scratches the surface of what these localized agents can actually do with unstructured data.
Oh, for sure.
Give us a real-world example from the sources of how far you can push this concept.
Oh, the ceiling on this workflow is wild when you introduce agentic capabilities. One of the most fascinating case studies from our sources highlighted a boutique accounting practice.
Okay.
The owner was facing a massive data entry nightmare. He needed to build a highly standardized, compliant document taxonomy inside Microsoft SharePoint.
Sounds tedious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His starting point was a chaotic, messy vendor spend report exported from QuickBooks. He needed to create a structured folder system for every single valid vendor on that list.
Doing that manually is days of mind-numbing, error-prone clicking.
Exactly. So he utilized the Perplexity computer agent. He didn't just ask for a list. He gave the agent access to the data and the environment. The agent analyzed the messy QuickBooks export, mathematically filtered out the noise and duplicate entries, and then it actually executed the physical task.
Wait, it clicked through SharePoint?
Yes. Using a virtual browser interface, it navigated SharePoint and created 133 top-level vendor folders.
That is crazy.
Inside those, it generated 1,463 subfolders, all utilizing a perfectly standardized naming convention.
Wow.
It even drafted and deposited start guess. Here, guide files into the root directories explaining the taxonomy to future employees. It handled all the heavy lifting, the clicking, the organizing, and the formatting in minutes.
Okay, that is an undeniably impressive use of an agent. It's moving beyond text generation and into actual digital labor.
It really is.
But this is exactly where the skeptic in me has to implement some serious guardrails. Because if you fully automate this process, if you hook this system up so it automatically emails clients, or directly updates your live SharePoint database, or pushes tasks to a team Slack channel without human oversight, you are walking directly into a trap.
You're talking about the hallucination risk.
I'm talking about the fundamental nature of the technology. AI models are probabilistic, not deterministic. They are guessing the next most likely word.
Yeah.
They will hallucinate.
Yeah. They will.
If you're relying on a transcript generated from bad meeting audio where two people talked over each other, the AI might misassign a crucial million-dollar task to the wrong department.
Yep.
Or it might hallucinate a completely fake deadline because it misheard May 1st as April 1st. If you don't catch that, you are firing a client or missing a compliance deadline.
About absolutely.
You cannot just take your hands off the steering wheel entirely.
That is the danger zone, and you are 100% right. You cannot treat these systems like deterministic software that runs perfectly in the background. The framework our sources heavily advocate for is keeping a human actively at the final decision point.
Let the AI clear the brush, but the human signs the check.
Exactly. Let the AI do the boring, heavy lifting. Let it format the markdown, extract the entities, and organize the chaotic data. But before anything gets finalized, a human reviews the output.
You have to read it.
You physically open and read that weekly action plan.md file before you hit send to the team. In the case of the accountant, you verify the list of 133 folders in a staging environment before you make the SharePoint live to the firm.
Right.
One of the best strategies our sources recommend for businesses trying to adopt this safely is deploying a Tiger team.
What does a Tiger team look like in this context?
It's a small, agile, two-person pod, usually one domain expert and one tech-savvy employee.
Okay.
You don't roll out an AI workflow to the whole company at once. The Tiger team runs quick, 10-day sprints to test these outputs in a safe, isolated sandbox.
Right, I see.
They try to break the slash commands. They look for where the AI hallucinates based on your company's specific jargon. Only after the Tiger team validates that the skill is highly accurate do you roll it out to the wider team.
I love that framework. Let the AI do the manual labor, but let the human do the management and quality control.
Yeah.
That is how you actually scale productivity without introducing catastrophic risk.
Which brings us to our weekend challenge for the listeners. We want you to feel this leverage firsthand.
Yes, try this out.
Take 30 minutes this weekend. Create one local folder on your computer's hard drive. Find 3 old, messy meeting transcripts or voice memos.
Just 3 is fine.
Connect that folder to the ChatGPT Desktop app using the Work Project feature we just outlined. Prompt it to extract your action items, and then tell it to build a /command skill.
Just test it in the sandbox environment. See if typing /process notes actually saves you an hour of admin work before the chaos of Monday morning rolls around.
Seriously, try it.
It is the absolute easiest, lowest risk way to feel the actual return on investment of this technology without getting lost in theoretical debates on Twitter.
Stop reading about AI and start delegating your busy work to it. By the way, if you want to keep discovering practical, hands-on workflows exactly like this, take a second to subscribe to the AI Verge. We sift through the noise so you can actually build.
Let's bring it all home and recap. The landscape is shifting incredibly fast, and the extremes of the industry are stretching further apart than ever.
The biggest macro takeaway today is the squeeze. The ceiling is rising rapidly as OpenAI pushes internally toward AGI research and autonomous agents that can generate net new knowledge.
Right.
But arguably, the most disruptive force is the floor dropping. Models like Z.AI's GLM 5.3 Flash, running on hyper-efficient architectures, are proving that you can get near-frontier intelligence for a fraction of a cent.
And as that base-level intelligence becomes virtually free, it's going to get baked into every piece of software you touch.
It's everywhere.
The one tool you need to watch this week is Google's Gemini 3.5 Transcribe. By opening up that live, self-correcting transcription API to developers, it is going to fundamentally change how computers process human speech, filtering out our noise and hesitation in real time.
And your one action item for the weekend, set up that localized ChatGPT work folder automation, take 30 minutes, build your custom /command, and let the AI process your messy meeting notes before Monday morning.
We will see you next time on The Deep Dive. But here's a final thought to mull over this weekend.
What do you got?
As these systems become cheaper and more pervasive, and as we increasingly rely on them to organize our files, parse our unstructured thoughts, and edit our messy human speech in real time, what happens to the weird, unexpected ideas that the AI mathematically decides are just filler? Keep building, stay grounded, and we'll catch you next time.